Welcome back to Forging a Minecraft Mod, lecture number 1, getting started. So, what did we get started with? Well, let's take a look. So this is what we did before the break. We set up a few different files here. If we could go take a closer look here, we have the mod itself, here, Steve's example. We have two proxies, client proxy and common proxy, and we have a packet handler as well. These are put in different packages and all are in the example package here. Okay, so the code we made, and for some reason it added a comment there, is the following. So we have the class here itself, and we have two annotations, the mod annotation and the network mod annotation. So the mod annotation is to tell it that it's a mod. We use the mod ID to tell it what ID it has, the name of the mod, and the version, which is usually like 0.0.1.f. I don't know. It could be anything. As you can see here, I'm using lecture 1. Then we have network mod, and that's telling it that it's a multiplayer mod, or well, what we need to tell it for it to work as a multiplayer mod. And we need to give it a channel. That's where it's going to talk. So basically, it's like I said before, like when you want to dial someone, when you want to phone someone, you need to know its number. So we give it a channel to use when talking between the client and the server, and we give it a packet handler. And we'll also tell it which sites it should operate on, or well, which sites are required. We have an instance here, using the instance annotation, with the ID like so. Then we have this sided proxy thingy here. So we tell it, well, the client proxy should be this part, and on the server side, the proxy should be that one. And then we can just initialize the sounds of the renderers, and that will only happen on the client side if we only put that code in the client proxy. Then we have these three different methods, the pre-init, the load, and mods loaded, which of course are optional names, so we could name it Pi, Horse Armor, and Terrible Weather, but that wouldn't really make sense. But we can if we want to. So what we need is just the event handler, and then the correct event, like so. So that's what we were talking about the last part of the lecture, so this is just a short summary. So let's continue where we left off. So what I want to do is clean this thing up here, and what we have up here is well, a few different values here. We have a value here as well, which is the same as that one, so it would be nice to keep these sort of in one location, so it's easy to see which values we have, and just make it a bit easier to get a good overview of. So what I'm going to do is create a class that will be able to keep track of all these values. So so I'm going to call it mod information. I think that's a good name. Like here, I could put it in a package, but I'm going to leave it there for now. You can move it later. And I want to specify 4 different values here. So I have public, static, final, string. So we want to reach it from everywhere. We don't want to create a new instance of mod information. We don't want to be able to change this afterwards, and it's a string. So it's quite straightforward here. So the ID of the mod should be Steve's example, like that. Okay, and what we want to do then is public static final string the name. So what's the name? Well, that's Steve's example, like that. I think that's good. And then we have the version as well. Version. I forgot string. Like that. And that should be lecture number 1. And finally, the channel we want to use. Okay, so that should be example here. So now I have well, basically I have all the different values we want to use. in the same location. We have the ID, we have the name, and we have the version, and finally the channel. So this is of course not necessary, but it makes it a bit cleaner. So we keep those values together in this class mod information, and then we can just refer to them from. If you go back here to Steve's example, we can just refer to them here. So if I, instead of doing that, I can do mod information dot, and now I get a suggested list here, well, a list of suggestions, and I want to use the ID. And which name do I want to use? Well, instead of using this string here, I can do mod information dot, which one do I want? Well, I want a name. And which version do I want? Well, let's take a look. Mod information dot version, and the channel here, mod information dot channel. Oops, there you go. But this is not everything. Here we have the ID here as well, so we can just refer to it again with mod information.id. So what does this do for us? Well, two things. First of all, it's easy to see in the class here, in the mod class, what we're doing. We give it the mod ID. Which mod ID do we give it? Well, the ID of this mod, the mod information.id. Which name do we have? Well, mod information.name. Which version do we have? Well, mod information.version. So we basically just give it these different values. It's easy to see what we're doing. We're using the instance here, and we give it the ID. We use the channel and the current channel that we want to work with. So it's pretty straightforward, but also we keep all the informations together, and this other mod information.java file, so we can just keep these values here. But like I said, this is not necessary. It doesn't really do anything functionality wise, but it helps us to keep these two things apart, so we have the values in one location and the actual code in another. So just a neat way to keep those things apart. But right, that was that small little note there. What I'm going to do now is create a config file. A config file is very, very useful when making a mod. For instance, you might want to allow the user to enable and disable different parts of your mod, set different maximum values of some functionality, or more commonly, set IDs of items, set IDs of blocks. Because when we have two mods trying to alter, trying to have blocks with the same IDs, we will have conflicts and things will just go bad. But luckily, if all the mods have config files, we can just change them, well, the user can change them and make sure that they work. Of course, if you have a lot of mods, it might be a lot of work to fix these configs, but it's still possible to fix the configs so the different mods work together, or well, as good together as possible. So how do we make a config file? Well, what I want to do is create if we go like that, so we get some more things here. And what I want to do is create a new package here, and well, I want to call it config. Seems to make sense. Like that. So now all of a sudden we have it like this. So we have a config package, network, proxies, and then the ones that do not, well, they aren't in a specific sub-package. They are, of course, in the example package here. And in here, I want to create a new class. Like this. And that should be called, I don't know, config handler should be a good name. Like that, and we put it in example.config. There you go. So this is just a simple class here. So what do we want to do? Well, of course we can sort this out in a few different ways, but we need to make a config from well, for a specific path, and yeah, that's quite a lot of work. But what we want to do is have a method here where we can initialize our config file like this. So we give it a file that's sort of a location on your computer. So it's more or less just a path where we can get some more information from it. And we want to create a config file there. So how do we do that? We need to do a lot of things. We need to read the file, we need to check for different values, and pass the different values to variables, and blah blah blah, except we don't. We're using Minecraft Forge, and not only does it allow us to access things that that we otherwise wouldn't be able to access, like changing what materials this tool is good against, and things like that. It also gives us some other useful things to be able to use, and one of those things are config files. So we can just do configuration equals new configuration. So here I am creating a new configuration file using the file that we send along in this initialization here. So when we do init, we give it a file, and it's going to create a configuration file there. But of course we need to import this as well, but now we will see something else. So well, before, when we did Control-Shift-O, so that's what I just did, it just imported the things we had. But now it does something different. Why? Well, usually when we do Control-Shift-O, it has only one possible thing to import. But, well, at this moment we had multiple things. It found one configuration file, one configuration class in Java x.security.auth.login, and found one in net.minecraftforge.common. It's quite easy to guess which one is the one we want. We want a configuration from Forge, so just click there. So Eclipse is going to give us a list of different possible imports if we're trying to import something that it can find in different locations. So now we create a config, and there you go. The config has been created. Easy. So what do we need to do to make this work properly? Well, first of all, we might want to load it. config.load. That's going to make sure that it loads everything from the config file, and then we can access it by accessing the values of this config. Sweet. So what do we want here? Well, I'm just going to have a simple variable here called test, and well, what do we do here? As you can see, there are many suggestions of what values we can get, but what we want basically are three different values we need to give it. We need to give it a category, so a category of this value that we want to get. I'm going to get it from the useless stuff category. That seems like a valid category, don't you think? Right, and the next one is the well, the entry in the config file. It could be like my stupid value, my block ID value number 25. It's basically the name of the thing in the config. So if I name it example here, then in the config there will be something called example, where we can set it to a specific value. Then the third value we need to give it is the default value. If it hasn't been set, which value should we use? If it the first time we run, how should we create a config file, and so on. And I'm just going to use 5 here as the default value. What do we get when we do config.get? Well, we get something called a property. It's just a class called a property. You don't really need to bother about that. The only thing you need to bother about is when you do config.get, we need to add .getInt here if we want to integer. So now we get the entry called example in the category useless stuff. If there's nothing there to read, we set it to be 5, and then we get the integer from that result, because there should be an integer there. Okay. So what's the next thing to do? Well, we can read something else. So string test2 equals config.get. Okay, so here it actually showed us what we need to add. So we need to add the category, the key, and the default value, exactly like we did before. I want to use the same category, useless stuff, and then we can add some text here, and finally the default value can actually be default text. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, we might want to get a string there. Right, so what have we done now? Well, we have loaded the config, and then we read the different values, and like this. So we read first an integer value and then a string value. And what do we want to do next? Actually, what we want to do is to save the config like this. So that means that if we have done any changes to the config, we're going to save it. Have we done any changes? Well, that might depend a bit. So if we had a blank config to start with, we've actually done changes. We've used these default values like that. So instead of having nothing there at all, we'll use those default values. So we're just saving the config afterwards. Sweet. So we load the config, read some values, and set default values if we don't have them, and then we save it again. What's the next step? Well, the next step is to do the following. Maybe we want to do use the values for something. Print line test2 like this. There you go. So just print them out. Of course, this is not the proper config. We have useless stuff with the name example. With the name example, with the default value of 5, I don't know why, and that's stored in test, and then we just print it out. So this doesn't really make sense, but we can take a look on how this would look like. We run the client like so, and alright, it's complaining, alright, you haven't saved this, so can you save this? Okay, let's save that. Go to this full screen here. Let's see as it's running. So let's see, we can see our output there. Did we miss it? I don't know, maybe we did. So just printing out a lot of stuff here, and it has loaded. So somewhere here we should see that it printed it all out. Hopefully. Where is it? It's nowhere. Why isn't it here? Can someone answer that? I can. So we've created a config handler. Sure, it's initializing. It's so easy to just create a config like this, right? Like I said, are we actually using this config handler? No. You always need to remember when you do something, you have your mod class here. This is the mod class. That's the one controlling what we're going to do. If we just create a config handler, it's not going to do anything. So we're not going to call that or anything. I just created a config handler. It can do whatever we want to. It can show a picture of a cow. We need to actually tell it to do so. And like I mentioned quite quickly before, was well, in pre-init you want to read configs as well. So what we want to do is config handler dot init like that, and we need to give it a file. What file should we give it? So we want it to be, we probably want it to be in the config folder, but where do we find a config folder? And then we should name it something. It's probably like Steve's example dot config blah blah blah, I don't know. But what we can do is the following: event dot get suggested configuration file. There you go, done. Nothing more. So we can actually, from the event, the pre-initialization event that we do get, we can ask it, where would you like us to put this configuration file? You know that I'm a mod, I'm the Steve's example mod, and I would like to put a config somewhere, but where do you like me to put it? Therefore we will get a proper location for it. So now if we run it, we're going to initialize here, and we're going to give it a path we want to have the config file at, and then we're going to create the configuration there. Okay, so now if we run it, it might work better. Okay, so now we're initializing our config handler with the profile file. There you go, now it's starting. We don't need to see that actually. We're going to see this output here. There you go, default text 5. I don't know if you saw it. I can scroll up to show it properly. Here we go. So it printed out default text and 5 because those were the things we got from the config. And what we could do now is to actually take a look where that happened to be put. So I'm currently in Steve's example where we can find a source and the well, the different commands here that we do have. Let's take a look in jars, and here we have a folder called config. And all of a sudden we have a Steve's example.cfg there. And that's our config file, because we asked where would you like us to put this config? Well, let's put it here with this name, and then it's just going to be located there. And if I open it, let's see if I can open it. There you go. So, there you go. Here's the configuration file. So it was created like this. So here's a category, and here's the different values we have. So if I change these, I can change these to like pi and 42 and save it. Let's move that out of the way. If I do that and run this again, we can close the old thing first. There you go. So now I'm running it again. Now we should see the new values instead of the old ones. So we shouldn't get what was the default pi. We should have pi and 42 when it's loading this. And there you go, pi and 42. If you didn't see it, I'm going to scroll up and show you. So of course this is not what you use the configuration files. Of course it wouldn't make sense to just print it out and to get a value, a value that we just print out. But this is how you do it. You create a configuration file at a specific location, and the location that we can put it at is the suggested location, and we can get that in pre-init. So let's see a better example on how you can set this all up. There you go. A lot of code there all of a sudden. Let's take a closer look. Okay, and this is actually named wrong. Value and some text value. So what I set up is something that would make a bit more sense. It's the same values and everything, but what we have, first of all, a lot of different values, and then the code here. So what we have is, first of all, we have a category saved in a variable here called useless stuff. Well, the category is called the category useless. Then when we get a value, we can just refer to category useless and category useless again. And then it's going to use, of course, the category called useless stuff. But then if we just refer to it with category useless, then we know that, well, it's always going to be this value. So no, we can't do spelling mistakes, and it's easy to see that we're using the same category and so on. And the same thing goes with the other values I set up. So for the example here, I have example value, example name, and example default. So what I do is, when I read the example value, I get the I use the config to read from category useless. I use the name that I want, and I have the default value here as well, and all of that is stored in example value. The same thing goes with the sum text one. So I have sum text as the value, I have sum text name as the entry name, the key, and I finally have the default value there. So I have a few different constants here. So I have this one, these two, and these two. So what that allows me is to very simply just set it up like this, and all the values are presented up here. And as you also can see, is that my final values, the values that I get in the end, which ironically enough aren't defined as final here, so two different types of final, but the values I get in the end, better way of explaining it, the example value and some text value that I get from the configs are stored here as well, and then I can just reach them from anywhere I want. So I could go back into Steve's example here, and after I have initialized my config handler, I can just do system.out.println config handler dot, well, some text value. There you go. That would print it out there instead. Of course, it wouldn't make too much of a difference compared to printing it out in the config handler, but what we would do instead would use it properly. So a bit of an easier setup. Of course, we need to access the value somehow, and this is a possible solution to reach it, rather than just having local variables here that we printed out right away. And of course, as people are suggesting in the chat, if you get a lot of these values, you might want to put them in a separate class. You just split it up in multiple classes to make it easier to read. But at the moment, I just put both of these things in the same thing. So the actual initialization and all the values. Sweet. So that's configuration files for you. We have one more thing I want to cover before we try to export this mod, and well, I can close this one. And what that is the mcmod.info file. So as you might remember, in the end of the last part of the lecture, I showed that we found our mod in the file, in the not in the file, but in the list of mods, sorry. But it didn't show us any information about the mod, and it said, alright, please add a mod mcmod.info file. And that's exactly what I'm going to do now. Okay, so what we want to do so is we go to source here, and we want to add a new file. This is going to be called, and has to be called, mcmod.info, like that. And it's going to be put here. And so it shouldn't be in our specific package, or any of these packages. It should just be here in source. So what do we want to add here? Well, we want to add a few different things using the JSON format. And if you don't know that format, then it's quite fine. I'm going to just copy in the possible content here. So what we have is a few different keys, you can say, and then the values for them. So first of all, we need to specify the mod ID. So I just gave it Steve's example. That's the mod ID we have. Then we need to specify the name. So that's Steve's example, the version, lecture 1. And now, of course, we can add other things. We can add credit, thanks to Steve, of course, because we're using his name and all the students of these courses. You can specify all the authors here, so we can't specify someone else as well. If you have multiple authors of your mod, add a simple description, a URL to where you can get information about your mod, maybe. This let's zoom in. The URL I'm using at the moment is just the URL to the current lecture. So if you follow that link, you get to the current lecture. Then you can specify up to URLs. You can that's not used, I don't think. You can specify which logo you want to have, some screenshots, and if your mod is a child mod, you can show that. So a child mod is a mod that requires another mod to run. So if you make an add-on to a mod, basically. So by having these different values here, so you can just take what I have here, get it from the lecture page, and modify it to your need. If you want to, it's also possible to just write it from scratch, of course. So if we have that and we place that here in the proper location, then we can run and see the difference. So we run the client like this. Okay. Waiting for it to start. We saw pi there for some reason. we we're printing out the value there. And if you go to mods now and click this example here, we can get a lot of extra information. Well, not a lot because I didn't add a lot, but we can see actually the version twice. The first version is the one, we can zoom this a bit. There you go. The first version here is the version we have defined in our mcmod.info file, where the second one is the actual version we specified by the mod. These should be the same. We have the mod ID and the credits, and we can't really see the whole thing because, well, the window is not big enough. There you go. Then we have like the URL we specified and other things like the description stuff. So just to give you some extra information about the mod, like so. So that's just a neat way of adding information to this mod list. Quit the game. So now we have a mod here with an mcmod.info file to actually get some information about it. It doesn't really do much. It prints out pi at the moment because that was what I added as the in the config. But we might want to export this to just see how it looks like. So how do we do it? Well, first of all, we might want to go into where is it? I have actually, there you go, in here. And what we want to do is hit recompile here. So we need to compile it here again, and let's go to the big view again. So there you go. So now we make sure that it's compiled here. And when that's done, I ran the bat one. You have the sh one as well if you want to. And when that's done, we want to do reobfuscate _srg to reobfuscate it all. This is going to take our compiled files and make sure that they are converted back to a proper format that we can then export and give to others. And I actually have to do these things. I haven't prepared them because when I prepared it I used 1.6.1, so I have no valid files here. So what we want to do is just recompile and reobfuscate. It takes a short while, as you can see. But when that is done, we will go into reop, and in here we will see a folder called Minecraft, and in there we will find our files. We will see that in a bit. There we go. So while we're waiting for that, we can take a look on the Minecraft launcher itself. So this is a new launcher if you haven't seen it already, and what we need to do is of course install Minecraft Forge. If you haven't seen how to do that, you can take a look on Wolf's video, I guess. That the other day I think he uploaded that. It's very straightforward. You download the installer. We can actually go and take a look on that. So if we go back here to there you go, to the Minecraft Forge download page, and what we will have to do is get the where is it? Here we go, the installer here. And if we download that and run it, it's going to install it for us. We of course need to run the launcher once to get the normal files. Or we could, if we want to install it manually, we could use the universal one here. And if we do so, we'll have to do the old thing with stuff. Well, you know, moving things in jar files. I don't know why you would use that. Use the installer. I think that's better. It's very easy. You just click go and so on. But while I was doing that, to distract you, because why not? I ran the other file, the reobfuscate sarge.bat, and it finished in 15 seconds here. So it outputted a few different files here, as it's telling us that it did. So let's take a look in the reop folder now. Now we have Minecraft here. In there we have example, we have config.net for proxies, and we have mod information.class and these example.class. So here we have all our different files. There you go. Okay, so what do we want to do now? Well, we want to convert this to a zip file. So I'm just doing send to a compressed folder, or well, a zip file. I know that was in Swedish, I'm sorry about that. So you just need to convert it to a zip file. It doesn't matter how you do it, but just do so. So now when we have the zip folder here, or well, zip file, we can just name it properly. So Steve's example lecture 1. That's a proper name, I do think. There you go. And what do we need to do now? We have all the things that we re-obfuscated, and those were put into our zip file. We need to add one more thing. We need to add the actual the mcmod.info file, because that's not located in the same location, because we don't compile that file. It's just an extra information file. So we go into source here, to Minecraft, and then what we can do is find it here. So what I want to do is just drag that along, put that into my zip file, and there we go. So now it has been added to the zip file, and this is our finished mod. Sweet. So let's remove Eclipse there, and here is the where I have, well, my current Minecraft instance set up to the default location. So that's app data roaming.minecraft, and then we just go into mods. So how do we install this mod? If we have installed Forge already, well, we copy the file there. There you go. First mod. Hit play when we have the Forge profile selected, and it's going to start up with that mod installed. You can export the mod differently. You can create a jar file, which is it can be made more secure, but I believe zip files are fine, so I'm not going to go into how to convert it to a jar file. It's not too tricky. So here we go. It's starting up with read messages, and here we go. Minecraft 1.6.2. And if we check in mods here, we have Steve's example, and with the mcmod.info file. Awesome. And like a lot of people are talking about, you can make this export process a lot easier with a lot of different scripts. But like people don't realize is that this is an introduction course, or well, an introduction lecture, and therefore it would be weird to introduce a lot of other things just to export your simple mod. So, like I said, you can make this process easier when you want to export your mod often and add a lot of stuff like that. But this is how you do it. You just recompile, re-obfuscate, zip those files together, and then add the mcmod.info file manually. So that's everything for now, actually. So we have a mod in the Minecraft launcher. So let's take a look on what we have done in today's lecture. Right, so we started with the setup. How do we do this? Well, first of all, we have Minecraft. We of course need Minecraft, and then we have the Minecraft coder pack, which for some reason I wrote mod coder pack. I think it was called that before. MCP, anyways. And then we have Forge mod loader, FML, and Minecraft Forge. So Minecraft coder pack allows us to decompile and recompile the code, so we can get the code in a very nice way, so we don't have to bother about that part. And then we have Forge mod loader, FML, which allows us to load the mod properly. And finally Minecraft Forge, which for instance gave us the possibility with the config file, but we'll also see a lot of other things which it is good at. So just giving us a config file is far from the point with Minecraft Forge, but it gives us some things like that as well to just help us along. And yes, you do need Minecraft. Then we set up a very simple mod. So we had the package should be in, and of course we import the correct things, cbw.mods.fml.common.mod, and well, then we add this mod annotation. So we do @mod, and then we give it the mod ID. Here we use Steve's example. Then we give it a name, Steve's example as well, but spelled a bit differently. And finally the version that we need and that is lecture 1, and then we add our actual class. Then in our class we might want to have these different methods. We have well, we start them with the annotation event handler, and then we give them a few different events. So we have FML pre-initialization event, FML initialization event, and FML post-initialization event. So we have pre-init, we have init, and post-init, but we can name them whatever we want. So in the first one we want to initialize blocks and items, graphics and sounds, and read configs, while in the init one we want to set up our mod. So whatever we need to do for our mod, do it in there. Recipes, setting up handlers for different things, and so on. And in the last step there, we might want to handle things that is done afterwards. For instance, interact with other mods that has been initialized. Next step was to make a config file, and to do so we could use that first line that you see to get the configuration, the suggested configuration file that FML suggests us to use, which is very simple. In the pre-init method we just do event.getSuggested configuration file. Very easy. Okay, and the next part here is well, to create the configuration file like that. So we just load it from the file, and then we use config.load to get all the information, and in the end we do config.save. In the middle there we get different values by doing config.get, give it a category name, the name of the entry that we want to, the key there, and then a default value, and then we want to get the value from the property using .getInt or .getString, for instance. And in the end we also added the mcmod.info file, which could look something like this. You just set it up, so you give it the mod ID, the name, the version, who to credit, the authors of the mod, the description, and some other informations like that, so like the URL, the screenshots, and the logo file. And then we put that file, so that this is it has to be called mcmod.info, and then we put that in our source folder to be used. And in the end here we spoke about how we export our mod. So first you start with recompile.bat or recompile.sh, depending on your system. You run that to make sure that everything has been recompiled. Then we need to run the reobfuscation _ srg.bat or the other .sh version. This is going to reobfuscate your mod, and alternately you can use the reobfuscate.bat and reobfuscate.sh instead of this Sarge version. I would recommend the Sarge versions, but it doesn't really matter. Then when we've done that, we can go into reob/Minecraft. There we will find our source that we have reobfuscated. How do we do it then? Well, we compress these things into a zip file, and we also add anything that we would like to add as well. So for instance, the mcmod.info file, so we need to add that manually. Finally, we name the zip properly, so we have our mod there, and then we're done. Just use it in the mods folder to play your mod. So that's about it for today. Don't forget the questions and exercises documents. We have questions about this this lecture to see if you have learned everything. There will be answers in the end, and then we have exercises so you can practice a few different things. At the moment it's practicing about the mcmod.info file and the config files. We have some further explorations if you want to continue on, and then answers, of course, like I said, to those things. But that's about it. This has been Forging a Minecraft Mod, lecture number 1, getting started. We haven't added any content to the mod itself, but we prepared that, so the next lecture, which is tomorrow if you're watching this live, then we will add content. That lecture is called Items. So I'll see you then.